Hello everyone, welcome to URM's webinar today. So today we're going to be talking about the small medium enterprises and some steps towards their cybersecurity journey. So my name is Lauren Gotting, new business director at URM. I'm joined in the office by Richard Stone, one of URM's senior account directors, and joining us remotely is Junu, head of cybersecurity at URM Consulting. So today's webinar is going to be slightly different from URM's usual approach. Typically, we drill down into a topic and go into a lot of detail, whereas today we're going to take more of a helicopter view, focus on SMEs into what controls they may want to consider, how to sort of take that step on the ladder to cyber and information security and good practice. Because every organisation is different, every organisation has different objectives, risks, services they deliver, so no two journeys are really the same. So we're going to go through a broad range of things, of frameworks, of controls that people may want to consider. So today's agenda, we'll start with sort of why cybersecurity is important and what the threats are to the SMEs. We'll talk about sort of a foundation step of cyber essentials and then strengthening that first step with the plus. We'll look at some other controls and other areas to consider in the journey of security, and then how to prioritise them and manage them moving forward, because it's not just you do everything once and you're secure for life. You know, there is some management to it. Towards the end of the session, we will open the floor up to any questions. You don't need to wait till then. You are able to ask any questions throughout the session live using the panel there. So please pop them in and we'll address as many as we can at the end. And if we don't get through to them all, we'll reach out and address them offline for you. So before we dive in, I'll give you a brief introduction into URM as an organisation. So we've been around for nearly 20 years now, and URM, we offer services around governance, risk and compliance, and as well as the cyber services as well. So our services are very tailored. As I mentioned, each business has different requirements. So with URM, we're able to tailor those services. If it's policy process to support testing and vice versa, we can offer all of those to our clients. It goes without saying, we've got a great team at URM that are really passionate about helping organisations be more secure, not just to tick a box to get something for the sake of it, but actually improve security day to day. And URM's team have worked both sides of the fence. So a lot of all of our experts have worked operationally in security, so when engaged can bring some real world experience to projects. And URM are also accredited, so we practice what we preach. You know, we're ISO 27 certified, we're CREST for pen testing, so we take security very important as well. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the two gentlemen I have on with me today. So Jun, if I pass over to you first, maybe you can just tell everyone a little bit more about your background.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everyone. I'm Juno. I'm the head of cybersecurity testing here at URM. I've been dealing with information security consulting and information security since 2010, more or less. Mostly on the offensive security, technical security assessment side of the fence. I have a few certification, especially towards the offensive security realm, as you can see. But yeah, that's what I do. I manage the team of penetration testers here at URM as well, including also the Cyber Essentials Plus service. And I'll hand over to Richard now.
Okay, my name's Richard Stone. I'm an account director at URM. I've been working with URM for over 18 years now. I've helped a range of ISO 27001 implementation projects. I've helped over 75 of the 450 successful certification projects URM has been involved in. And beyond that, I've worked with clients on a range of different standards and regulatory requirements from a cybersecurity perspective, so things like PCI DSS, SOC 2, Gambling Commission. I've worked with those projects and helped organisations address their wider information security needs.
Brilliant, thank you both. So we've got some good experience in the room that'll help me out for the rest of the presentation. So we're going to look at the why cybersecurity, but before we do, Rich, what defines an SME?
Yeah, well, obviously it's a fairly broad, there's lots of definitions out there, but I think the UK government's definition is any organisation that employs 250 employees or less and has a turnover of less than 45 million. I mean, that's a very big group of companies. I think there's about 5.7 million SMEs within the UK. So yeah, it's a big pot, and obviously, you know, there's a lot of variety within that group. But yeah, that's the definition.
Brilliant. So there is a lot out there that should be concerned then. So, Rich, why is cybersecurity important to SMEs in particular? Well,
unfortunately, I think cybersecurity is very much the topic at the moment. There's a lot of cybersecurity attacks going on. Obviously, they're affecting a lot of organisations. We haven't got to look very far for news about cyber breaches that are happening. Just recently, we've had brands like Marks and Spencer's, the Co-op Group being affected by cyber attacks, and obviously the big companies, they get all the news, they get the headlines, but we know that all organisations, SMEs included, are subject to cyber incidents, cyber attacks. I think recently there's been an article from Forbes that said that in the last year, over 40% of SMEs have suffered a cyber incident, and obviously, you know, the consequences of those attacks can be devastating for a business. I mean, even the larger organisations we've seen, like Marks and Spencer's and Co-op, they've suffered, you know, really big issues, big impacts to their business, not being able to take orders online, having stock issues in the shops, and those issues can be just as devastating for SMEs in terms of their ability to deliver their services and their business to their clients. So it's a big issue for all organisations, SMEs in particular. Yeah, they need to be aware of it and addressing it.
Yeah. Do you think, because SMEs, obviously, if they had a big hit like the M&S, they probably wouldn't survive? Is that why we don't hear about it on the news, do you reckon?
I think it's just because it's so prevalent in, you know, unfortunately, cyber attacks are just happening so frequently to businesses in general that they don't warrant news. It's only when it's a large organisation that and it has a very visible impact that we get to hear about it.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you know, SMEs are vulnerable. You know, they have less resources than.
I'll just go on to the next slide,
yeah,
Rich. We'll cover the why. So before we get into it, so why are the SMEs being targeted?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so SMEs, you know, they are being targeted because they are smaller. They, you know, they're seen to have less resource available to address cyber issues. They're not going to potentially they're not going to have dedicated teams looking at cyber threats coming on board. They may be reliant on third parties to support them from a cyber security perspective. So they're seen as potentially easy targets. So that and equally small organisations, what we typically see is that as organisations grow, so does their cyber security maturity grow. And so small organisations, obviously, they're going to be very much focused on their core business delivery, and it means that their maturity around implementing information security controls may not be as advanced as ideally it should be. I mean, there's good examples of that we see around patching and software updates and backups. We see small organisations not necessarily having the same level of proactive approach to addressing those requirements. And SMEs, they're frequently involved in supply chains with larger organizations, and they can be seen as a way into those larger organizations. If a cyber attack is successful with an SME, they may secure information that will allow them to go on and attack a larger organization,
bigger fish.
Bigger fish. So, they're seen potentially as a way in to perhaps a more lucrative target from a cyber attack perspective. And equally, I think small businesses, they want to be up and running, they want to be responsive to their clients, so they're likely to do whatever they can do to get back up and running as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and just get it sorted out.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rich. So what would you say, what are the main cyber threats to SMEs? Are these specific to SMEs, or what are your thoughts on this?
I don't think they are, to be honest. I think unfortunately they're facing the same threats as larger organizations. So in some ways they're having to deal with the same threats with less resource available to them to address those. So, we're seeing the same sort of areas around phishing and emails. They're getting more sophisticated with the introduction of AI, more convincing. Yeah. And obviously, organizations are keen to secure new business. So, there's a danger there that, that an SME in their desire to be responsive can at the same time fall foul to these attacks. As I said about unpatched systems, that if the system isn't patched and kept up to date, inevitably there will be vulnerabilities, and the cyber attackers will be looking for those and looking to exploit those. So same sort of threats.
Same threats. I think what's scary when it comes to the cyber world, which I've only learned recently, is cyber attackers now aren't in basements, of their parents' houses. They're in offices, they wear suits, they have board meetings, and they have targets, and they have a trail.
Cyber attackers these days are even employing agents, engaging with agents to deliver the cyber attack for them. They don't have time to do all the cyber attacks, so they're actually using third parties to support that. So
supply chain to attack supply chain. So what's the world coming to?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So, Rich, there's a few controls out there. Obviously, technological controls. Could you give us maybe a bit of a breakdown of the main sort of types then that we have?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when we're talking about cyber, technology is key. So, of course, there's a whole range of technical controls you can put in place to minimize the opportunity for a cyber attack or minimize the impact of that cyber attack. But equally, there are other controls around, how your organization, how it adopts information security, cyber security, in terms of, having good information security policies, password policies, access control, risk management. There's a whole range of controls you can adopt from an organizational perspective that will make you more resilient to an attack. There are people controls. Most breaches, unfortunately, start with some form of member of staff or contractor clicking on the wrong link, providing access to systems, providing information, privileged information. And finally, we're looking at physical control. So if you're office based, and obviously you want to prevent unauthorized access to your offices, and if you're working from home, you need to make sure your equipment at home is secure. If you're bring your own devices, again, that needs to be secure. So there's a whole range of things to think about from a remote working perspective, as well as on site from a physical security perspective.
Very good. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not just all about technical nowadays, is it, either? Especially when phishing and stuff is all about people. Okay, so obviously we're going to dive into technological first, really. So we're going to talk about cyber essentials. I'm going to ask Jun to jump in to discuss the cyber essentials scheme, being an assessor here. So we almost sort of say this is cyber essentials is the foundation to security, because it asks you for some essential security practice. So Jun, can you start by giving us a little bit of an overview of the scheme, please, the Cyber Essentials scheme?
Yes, of course. So the Cyber Essentials is as the slide says, a government-backed scheme. So it is defined by the NCSC at the government level, and it's an attempt from the UK government to make the UK a safe space to have business, and safe in terms of cybersecurity in this case. So the objective of the Cyber Essentials, as the name says, is to have some essential basic security measure as a standard for all UK businesses to adopt, to be able to say that UK businesses operate in a cyber secure way. And how the aim is to protect most businesses, the majority of the businesses in the UK, from common cyber threats. It doesn't have to be confused with other initiatives that are more focused, maybe on more targeted nation-state attacks. Cyber Essential is not going to protect you from the sophisticated hacker from Russia or other nation-state hacking teams, but it's going to help you adopt some basic security measures that you can adopt as an organization, especially as a small or medium size enterprise organization that wants to start or improve their cybersecurity journey.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jim. Sorry, Jim, I was just going to say, on the next slide, we're going to dive into the controls in a little bit more detail, the 5 control areas. Can you give us a bit of an overview on what you're looking for here?
Yes, of course. So these are the 5 technical controls that the scheme has put in place, which are firewall, secure configuration, security update management, user access control, and malware protection. So basically, what the objectives of these controls are to make sure that your private information cannot be accessed by people or entities that should not have access to them. So firewalls are a great place to start if you want to protect your, for example, corporate network from any threat actor on the internet. You put a firewall, a boundary firewall, and deny access from the external network to your internal network. But at the same way, you can put a firewall to protect your internal servers from internal threat actors as well. And if you want to administer your servers, you can do that by blocking all the access from corporate networks in terms of management, administrative access to the firewalls, to the servers, and then you can allow only your IT network, the management network, to access those servers to manage them. Secure configuration is about configuring and hardening a little bit your IT systems. It can go from removing any unnecessary service from the devices or the servers, removing any unused users or guest accounts, or if you're talking about mobile devices, laptops, phones, configuring device locking so that when you leave your phone unattended or it gets stolen, you can't really access the device without unlocking it with a PIN or a biometrics, etc. Security update management is about patching. One of the main thing about Cyber Essentials is keeping your system up to date, making sure that when a vulnerability is identified on the software you're running, those are patched and managed in time. And user access control is again about making sure that only users with certain privileges can access certain functionality or data within your organization. It's highly in line with the principle of least privilege, where if you, for example, an organization should give only the necessary access to their employees to perform their tasks. So they shouldn't have, for example, admin access to everything, but they should have the minimum access they need. And malware control protection is about antiviruses, EDR, etc. So protecting against viruses that can be the employees' organization can have to deal with.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jun. What's interesting there is a few of those already tick off and combat some of the threats Richard already mentioned. So you can see the foundations already building. So achieving Cyber Essentials compliance, Jun, how does it happen? How do people move forward with Cyber Essentials?
Yeah, so from a practical perspective, it's a self-assessment questionnaire. So where you have to answer a set of structured questions to demonstrate, and through those answers, you demonstrate that you meet the requirements and you have those 5 controls in place throughout the organization. And what happens is that once you answer and submit the questionnaire, URM as a certification body will assess your answers and make sure that they are compliant with the requirements to become Cyber Essential certified. And if all the questions demonstrate that your controls are in place, you obtain a certificate. It's actually quite simple and straightforward. It's a point-in-time assessment, so it assesses and certifies that at that point in time you meet the requirements. But the questions they ask are there to prove that you actually continuously adhere to those essential security practices. So it's a good way also to prove to your clients that you have those security measures in place. There are some common pitfalls to avoid, and those are typically related to, for example, unsupported software being used because some part of your business need that Windows 7 or Windows XP to run a certain machinery in the in your premises. The lack of MFA because some cloud providers don't provide MFA, or because you haven't thought about or you haven't enforced MFA on every kind of system you use. The use of admin privileges by employees for their day-to-day, because maybe they are developers or they are maybe working in IT, so they think they need to have admin privileges all the time, but that obviously it's something that Cyber Essentials tries to prevent. And
Brilliant.
Overlooking personal devices, I think. So bring your own devices to, companies sometimes allow personal devices to access organizational data, but you have to make sure those personal devices are also secure.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jun. So quite high level there. For anyone, looking into this in more detail, we've got some dedicated specific webinars available on our website. So if there is an interest to learn more, please just put it on your feedback form and we can send you over a link. Brilliant. So Jun, we're now going to just dive into, going that additional step from Cyber Essentials, which is a self-assessment, and looking at the Cyber Essentials Plus. So Jun, at quite a high level there, what's the Cyber Essentials Plus consist of?
Yeah, so the Cyber Essentials Plus is basically a technical verification that whatever you declare in the Cyber Essentials questionnaire is actually being done by your organization. So an assessor will come to you and perform some technical checks, including vulnerability assessment on the external on your external attack surface, but also on your internal servers and end user devices. Make sure that the controls are in place, that users don't have, for example, administrative privileges for their day-to-day, that your anti-malware solutions are configured in line with your vendor's recommendation, and that everything you declare basically is in place. And your patching, for example, is one big thing that you declare, for example, in the question that you're patching your systems to a certain standard. That's what you're going to verify. I guess it's the difference between theory and practice. In theory, with the Cyber Essentials questionnaire, you're doing things, and C+ demonstrate that you're actually in practice doing it. Yeah.
Excellent, brilliant. So it's just that little step further. Thank you, Jun. And then in terms of the benefits, obviously, huge benefit is starting the Cyber Essentials journey and getting these controls in place. But Jun, you're right, maybe just to pick out a few of these benefits here and go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so there are definitely two of the easiest, let's say, less complex certifications to obtain, and also to provide assurance to your stakeholders that you're doing things right, because there's compared to other, bigger standards and certification, it has a much lower overhead. For example, the C is the self-assessment. So you're just self-declaring what you do, and based on your answers, you're able to obtain a certification. The certification is not just a badge. It's very much recognized within the UK, at least. And if you want to bid for a tender for the central government, it's actually a requirement. So you won't be even able to bid for a tender for the central government if you're not Cyber Essentials certified. But it's getting more and more recognized also on the private sector. So you may also have requirements to be a Cyber Essentials Plus certified organization to be part of the supply chain of larger organizations. One great benefit, I guess, is that certain companies may be able to obtain free cyber insurance as well. So it would be a free cyber liability insurance that comes with the Cyber Essentials certifications. And because of the high quality of the certification and of the scheme and the accreditation and certification bodies being part of the scheme, is being recognized as a good starting point for your cybersecurity. So it actually gives assurance to a lot of stakeholders, including insurances, where they have noticed that Cyber Essentials Plus certified organizations are 90% less likely to incur in a cyber incident, for example. The technical testing part of it also gives you technical assurance that what you're doing or what you think you're doing as an organization is actually working. So yeah, those are at the high level the main benefits, I guess.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's interesting you say about it creeping over to the private sector. I know St James's Place, they put a stipulation in around Cyber Essentials Plus to their advisors. I understand Lexel with the law firms, they recommend their firms to go through Cyber Essentials process. So it's creeping out there. It's definitely recognised. In terms of costs and timeframes then for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, Cyber Essentials is it's an annual cost. It varies from £320 to £600 per year for the application, and that's based on number of employees. But you should be able to achieve Cyber Essentials without having to go and buy, I don't know, a fancy asset management solution or anything sort of over and above what you are doing, as long as you're meeting those requirements. Cyber Essentials Plus, that really varies because of the testing and sampling of different devices in the IT estate. The cost for that vary dependent on how uniformed. So if you've got a gold image, that's going to be a lower price than if you've got 1,000 devices, but you've got 15 special build over there, 100 Windows there, 100 Mac, and and it's really dispersed. Then we have to test more devices, which just takes more time. But typically, Cyber Essentials Plus assessments, day, 2 days, 3 days, depending on how many devices need to be tested. Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, there is a window. So if you have to do Cyber Essentials first if you want the Plus, and then you must do the Plus within 3 months of having your Cyber Essentials certificate. So there's a few time frames to consider if you're looking to start the journey here. Again, we've got some webinars on the website. We've got another webinar in the summer around Cyber Essentials specifically as well. So if this is if this is an interest of you, just again, let us know or just stay in touch with us. Okay, so a lot of technical controls in Cyber Essentials Plus. I'm gonna jump back to Richard now to talk about some other controls that can be considered. And you'll see on the screen here we've pulled 9 potential controls to consider, and we won't run through them all, but I think if we pick a few key ones out, Rich, if we start security awareness training, people, we've mentioned people a few times as being a threat. How does this help? What does this bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, obviously your staff are your greatest asset as a company, but equally they can be the way cyber attackers get access to your IT and your IT systems. So making staff aware of how cyber attacks are likely to present themselves gives them the best opportunity to spot them and to not fall into clicking on links that they shouldn't do, providing information they shouldn't. as I say, these attacks are getting ever more sophisticated, using AI, making them very, very convincing. So, the need to brief staff, keep them up to date, make them aware of how a cyber attack might present itself to them is becoming more and more relevant and important. And obviously, having identified that is a threat, you need to also train staff as to what to do if for any reason they suspect their device has been affected by a cyber attack.
So does that tie into number 4 here, the incident?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, then incident response. Really, it's incident recognition first. Recognize that you've got a cybersecurity incident. Know how to report that internally if that's part of your incident management process. How to escalate that, and equally how to respond directly. Should you be unplugging your devices, disconnecting from the network? You need to be clear about that. Organizations should have given some thought to that, put that into an incident plan, and they should have effectively given their staff an opportunity to practice responding to an incident. So, do an exercise, get familiar with how an incident might happen, how it might escalate, and what steps you can take as a member of staff, or even as a member of the IT team, in terms of what steps can you take to minimize the impact of that incident, to shorten the incident, to make sure it doesn't proliferate into your other systems, or even worse, to trusted clients, etc. So, incident management, incident awareness is really important. Incident exercising is a great way to get people up to speed and make sure that if they have an incident, it's kind of built in as to how they're going to react.
Brilliant, excellent. Thank you, Richard. I know we're going to cover risk assessment in more detail. We're also going to cover pen testing in more detail. Jun, if I can come over to you, maybe just to give us a little bit more insight into the encryption control.
Yes, of course. So encryption is obviously a great way to secure the confidentiality of your data. It can be both at rest or in transit. So anything that you transmit over the network should be encrypted, so that anybody who has access to the transmission medium or can see the traffic flowing from you to a service that you're using, even if they're able to get the traffic, they're not able to read it because it's encrypted. And obviously, encryption at rest is increasingly important as well, because even if you store information in a server that is under your control and nobody should have access to it, there are always going to be cases where somebody may be able to access. And even if they're not malicious, and they're also, for example, your IT administrators, they shouldn't be able to just go into the server and read personal data or passwords or credit card data of your clients. So those should be always encrypted. So it's a great way to protect the confidentiality of your data that should be deployed. And I guess another way that is important is, for example, for mobile devices. Like if you have laptops, it's a good way to protect any content on your laptops should that be lost while traveling or being away from your offices.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Yeah, sounds really useful, that one. Yeah, sounds essential, to be honest. So brilliant. So I said we'd go into more detail on pen testing. So the next sort of part of the presentation is going through, right, so with Cyber Essentials Plus, okay, what would the next sort of cyber step be to consider, and that would be pen testing. So Jun, at a very high level, what's pen testing? How is it defined?
Yeah, so penetration testing is a simulated attack using real-world techniques against some IT system that you own. So it's a way to identify vulnerabilities before real attackers will be able to do that, and obviously to be able to remediate those vulnerabilities before it's too late. Typically, you would receive a prioritized list of issues that your organization should focus on to reduce the risk of exposing a certain service or a certain system to your clients or to your suppliers or to your stakeholders in general. And yeah, so that's in a nutshell what a pen testing is. It can have multiple declinations. So yeah.
Thanks, John. So we're going to dive into the details now of sort of the different types of pen tests. I know you probably get involved with these, Jun, day in, day out. So maybe pick a few of your favorite or your most interesting ones to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. So as I was saying, the penetration testing is quite a wide area, and there are multiple systems that can be included. They can be penetration tested. So obviously the common ones are external pen testing to make sure that somebody from the internet cannot get into your internal network, or there can be an internal pen test where you can assess a malicious threat actor within your organization. What could they do? And it doesn't have to be a malicious employee. It can be somebody just clicking a phishing email and then giving access to your internal systems to a threat actor. Social engineering is sometimes included as part of penetration testing, and it could be both say related to phishing or to phishing, smishing. Now there are multiple ways of trick employees into giving you more information or clicking something, but it can also be physical. So you can also try to attempt to gain unauthorized access to a server, not by exploiting a 0-day on an exposed service on the internet. You could just walk into a building and then get physical access to those information. So there's multiple services that we offer, and that can be, and tests that can be done on different systems depending on what you have and what your priorities are.
Can I ask a quick question? Is there anything specific a certain type of business should be doing in terms of testing? You know, whether that's a particular industry must have an external every year, or a particular business providing a service must do a security review every year. Is there anything like that that you're aware of?
Yes, of course. So there are some specific requirements that can come with, typically with related to compliance with certain standards, or to be compliant with certain regulations. So for example, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, for example, the PCI. So if you deal with credit card data, payment data, you would need to comply with the PCI DSS standard, and in that case, to maintain that accreditation, the certification, you must perform penetration testing on the systems which are in scope for that certification. There are other regulatory requirements. For example, now DORA could be one of those things where organizations are required to perform penetration testing or red teaming attacks or purple teaming attacks as part of their compliance. Or there are other standards that can suggest or recommend doing it while not mandating it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jun. Okay, so we've looked at the types of testing. Can you run us through the benefits of testing, Jun?
Yes, I guess the main benefit is that you can obtain assurance that your systems have the necessary security controls in place, right, to protect against those real-world attacks. And in the worst case, I guess, if you don't get assurance, you can get recommendations on how to get to that to that security posture. And to do that, you don't need to have had an incident in the past. You can do it in a controlled way, and because the testers that you engage for the assessment will respect your system, they will try to avoid causing disruptions. And if issues are identified, for example, if you realize that all your clients' data can be stolen by somebody, or sensitive data can be exposed, you're still safe because you're relying on a professional to do it in an ethical way. And in addition, at the end, you can also get an impact assessment. You can understand okay, we have this vulnerability. What does that mean for my business? Is it going to have huge impact? Is it going to be a reputational impact? Is it going to be a financial impact? Is it going to be, personal data involved or not? What's going to be my business impact? That's some of the questions that the pen test can answer.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jun. And Jun, for those maybe that are thinking, right, okay, actually a pen test does sound like our next step of the journey. What steps, what are the key steps from your perspective to having a pen test done?
Yeah, so I guess obviously the first step is the identification of the requirements. So you need to realize that you need a pen test, and that is something that brings value to your organization. And as we said before, that can come from regulatory requirements or from standards, but in the best cases, it can come directly as a consequence of an organization awareness that a pen test is a great way to obtain expert external validation that your systems are implemented in a secure way, and they can withstand real world attacks. Once you have identified the requirement, the scoping is there's a scoping phase where which we deem to be one of the most important phases of the whole process, where you identify the objective of the test. Is it compliance driven, or do you want to validate a specific vulnerability? Do you want to validate your defensive controls? It's identifying what assets are in scope or not. You may want to test specific servers, but not specific APIs. You may want to include the production systems, or maybe you want to test only the development system, but want to avoid production systems. The testing approach, should it be a black box, white box, gray box? So how much information you give to the tester, and how, and the tester can help you define what's the best level of knowledge you should give to the tester to best meet your objectives that you've defined before. It's a great way also to identify and define the rules of engagement. Do you include phishing or tricking employees to give you access? Do you exclude that? Do you exclude denial of service testing so that you don't have disruptions, etc.? And obviously to understand what authorizations you need from any third parties you're hosting services on. Then we have a preparation phase where you would typically prepare the environment, provide all the necessary prerequisites to the assessors, to the testers. The delivery phase, where the test is effectively executed, attacks are done, vulnerabilities are identified, and then reported to the client. So you will receive a report, typically accompanied by a call or any kind of communication you prefer with the testers to get to understand the findings, understand the solutions recommended, and that's part of the post-assessment where you can have ask questions if anything is not clear on the report, or if you want clarification about how to replicate a certain attack or vulnerability. There's a whole post-assessment phase where you can get more support to get the best of your pen test.
Brilliant, excellent, very key steps there. Thank you very much, Jun. Excellent. So also we've now spoken about quite a few different controls, technical controls, people controls. We're going to look at now how to prioritize and manage them moving forward, because it's not just a one-stop shop or just done. So Rich, what's your suggestions here? What's the recommendation?
Yeah, I think once you've sort of dealt with the basics through something like Cyber Essentials, the next step is really to take ownership of your cybersecurity management and to implement or align with a best practice management standard. And that's really where something like ISO 27001 comes into play. ISO 27001, it's the international standard for information security management systems, and it's a great standard to use to help you develop a management system that will help you, allow you to identify information security risks, look at the effectiveness of of controls and what additional controls you might want to put in place to minimize those risks. Have a way of evaluating the effectiveness, the ongoing effectiveness of those controls, and drive that sort of program of continuous improvement from a cyber security, information security perspective. ISO 27001 has been around for a bit of time. It gets updated, and obviously those updates can reflect new control requirements. The last update was very much focused on controls and new controls, and again those controls were to address the sort of evolving cyber threats that are coming into play. So framework for supporting information security management on an ongoing basis, that's a really good step. ISO 27001, you can get certified, but equally you can just target alignment. You know, there are elements you can pick and choose from within that standard. You know, any element of that standard that you implement is going to improve your cyber resilience.
I think that's a really important point there, Rich, especially for the small mediums. You know, you can align up to it. You don't need to certify. You don't need annual certification costs if you don't have to, but shouldn't avoid doing the best practices anyway.
I mean, you can get access to the standards at relatively low costs, and then obviously you've got all of that advice and guidance available to you in terms of developing your information security, cyber security approach.
When you say the standards, Rich, this is what we're going to go through on this slide, hey, the clauses and the controls, yeah?
Sure. So, yeah, ISO 27001, it basically has two key elements to it. It has the clauses, which effectively gives you guidance on what you need to do to implement a best practice management system for a cyber security, information security perspective. So that's a range of steps. We'll talk about that in the next slide that you need to do to get your management system implemented and up and running and operating. And then it also provides some controls, 93 odd controls split into 4 areas around organization, people, physical controls, technical controls. These are controls that you should really be considering implementing to help mitigate your information security risks. Obviously, some of those will be controls you might have implemented for Cyber Essentials, but you know, it's going to build on that and broaden that and give you a much more holistic cyber security response.
Yeah. Excellent. I know obviously we outlined 9 controls earlier on, but there's a whole load of to consider, isn't it?
Exactly.
Brilliant. So you mentioned the clauses. So this is the clauses in a little bit more detail.
This is the clauses. Yeah. This is what you have to do. This is all these boxes you need to address to gain a full alignment or certification to the ISO 27001 standard. So you know, you have to do these things. It looks complicated, you know, there's a lot of things to be addressed, but it is built to be applicable to any organization. So whether you're, you know, a small SME with 4 or 5 employees, or you're a multinational, ISO 27001 is there to be, and has been designed to be appropriate and implemented within those organizations. There's a lot of planning within it. To make sure that you have, you know, you've identified the needs that you need to address in order for that information security management system to be effective. You need to think about scope. Are you going to include the whole organization, or are you going to look at information security, cyber security in relationship to a particular service? Have you got senior management commitment? That's a key one. You need to get that senior management commitment in place if this is going to be implemented and adopted by your organization. If senior management aren't behind it, it's going to be very hard to get it running effectively.
Does that circle back to like organizational controls, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, your organization, you need to be doing management review, you need to be doing internal audit, you need to be looking at your information security on a regular basis and making decisions about how you're going to take this forward. And one key area around implementing this is doing a risk assessment. So you've got to be clear about what you're looking to protect and what potentially might impact what you're trying to protect. We'll talk about that in the next slide.
Yeah, that leads us nicely on, Rich, to the focus on the risk assessment.
Yeah, so this is really the foundation stone, or I would say, it's the foundation stone of ISO 27001, but it's also, it's just a core requirement if you want to start prioritizing what cybersecurity controls you're going to put in place and where you're going to spend your money and where you're going to focus your attention. Really, if you do a cybersecurity information security risk assessment, the output of that will tell you where you need to focus on. So the risk assessment involves identifying the information that your company is processing in the delivery of its services, whether that's client data, staff data, financial data. You need to understand that information. You need to start thinking about what would be the impact of a cyber attack on that information. How might it impact the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that information? And what would be the business impact if a breach happened? And that hopefully will tell you, where your priorities are, and you can start thinking about what threats might trigger that breach. So again, obviously cyber attack from a confidentiality perspective, but equally from an integrity perspective, if somebody comes in and it's a ransomware attack and they encrypt all your data and you can't access it, that's going to affect the integrity of your data, but also the availability of your data. So you need to consider those aspects. And having identified those threats, you need to look at what controls you can put in place to mitigate those threats. Obviously, if you've gone through Cyber Essentials, again, you may have already ticked off and addressed some of those areas. If you've done some pen testing, that might again highlight some obvious controls that you can put in place to improve your information security perspective. But 27 is looking beyond that. It's looking at, controls around people, about physical security, around organizational security. So it's a broader standard, but the risk assessment is what drives that control selection and prioritization.
Sounds like it just gives it really clear picture. Where are we focusing our efforts? What do we need to plug?
Absolutely. Yeah. And instead of the IT having to come up with how do we defend the company, this is the business getting involved and really identifying where those threats lie and what steps should be taken to improve that position.
Absolutely, thanks, Rich. So obviously there's a lot of benefits to ISO 27001, not just complying, but there's a few that are beneficial to certifying as well. Rich, do you want to run through maybe a few of these?
Yeah, I mean, ISO 27001, it's not a one-off. You certify, you have to recertify. If you're going through certification, you need to recertify every 3 years. You're subject to continuous annual assessment visits. But even if you're just complying, if you are fully complying, you're going to have established a program of continuous improvement, and that's going to reduce business risk. So definitely, the key objective is to reduce risk, and that's what the standard will do. Beyond that, obviously, if you do go for certification, it's a great badge to have. It shows that you're taking information security seriously, that you're very proactive about your cybersecurity approach, and it gives clients and customers real assurance that you know what your information securities are and that you're taking proactive steps to address them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rick.
So just finally, I mean, it's one key area is obviously if you are going for tenders nowadays, if you're any kind of trying to get onto a large organization's supply chain involves you completing numerous tender questionnaires, etc., around your cybersecurity approach. If you've got Cyber Essentials, if you've got ISO 27001, you find that that will address 90% of the questions that clients might be concerned about.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rich. I'm mindful of the time. We've only got a couple more slides to cover. So fitting the frameworks together. So this journey that an organisation's been on, how do they sort of work together?
Yeah, I think, as we've already said, that they're overlapping. So, by doing Cyber Essentials, you will already have looked at and addressed and responded to a range of controls that are within ISO 27001. But obviously ISO 27001 takes that a bit further, and also means that you are more, your response is much more individual. It's based on that risk assessment for your organization. So your cybersecurity response is addressing risks that are relevant to your business and to your business operation. So, you know, this sort of building up that layered approach is going to improve your, your cyber resilience. And, you know, by adopting these standards and getting the business involved in these standards, you're by default, you're increasing that employee awareness.
Strength in numbers. Excellent. Thank you very much, Rich. And finally, before we move on to questions, you know, you may be asking what next. You know, we're a specific business, you know, we're going through this, what next? So there is a number of industry specific security, cyber, quality frameworks out there, which we get involved with, you know, as an organization with our clients. So if any of these, you know, feel applicable, do let us know. And or if you think, oh, what should I be looking at next? Again, let us know so we can maybe set a call up with one of our specialists. But here's a few. Richard, I'm mindful of the time. So if we pick out one, if we said, right, you know, on top of what we've discussed already, what about SOC 2?
Yeah, SOC 2, I mean, this is again, it's an information security standard, and it's really one that has taken hold and is more prevalent in the USA, in America. A lot of organizations in America will use SOC 2 as their default information security standard. And if you are a client who is also your company and you're working with American clients, then you might find that you're getting requests for SOC 2 compliance. It shares a lot of the controls around ISO 27001, so there is that overlap, but it has specific and unique reporting requirements. So again, you know, we can help with that, but it's, you know, 27 is a great way to manage your SOC 2 to give you the underlying information security position you need to be able to achieve SOC 2. But again, there's that additional requirement just in terms of the reporting.
Okay. Excellent, brilliant. And as I said, if you're looking at this list and you think, oh, I've seen that in a contract somewhere, and you want to, you know, you want to explore it or learn more, we may have a webinar, but we've certainly got specialists that will happily answer any questions you may have. Any questions? We've had a few questions coming. I don't think we're going to get round to them all, so you will hear from us to address them. I think we've had one come in around who defines the requirements of certification in order to participate in dealings with certain organisations. Are these legal requirements for certain business types? So in all honesty, it varies. The answer to that question is there isn't a set body. It depends who you're working with, who you're trying to onboard with. Yeah. Are you trying to deal with a certain organisation?
Obviously, as Jonas has already highlighted, you know, Cyber Essentials, you've got if you're working with government organisations, they're going to want you to have Cyber Essentials Plus potentially. If you're dealing with clients from a PCI, from a car payments, you're going to need PCI.
Brilliant, thanks, Rich. Right, okay, so off the back of this, then how can URM help? So any of the services we've discussed today or frameworks we can help with, whether that's Cyber Essentials, ISO 27, pen testing. Upcoming events. So I mentioned a few times we run a series of webinars. So our next one is all around GDPR and how a small medium enterprise, you know, adopts those requirements and what are critical and maybe what are a bit nice to have. So that is next month now. And Cyber Essentials Plus in July. So recently there's been some changes. We're going to do a session on what we've learned from those changes and how businesses have been affected. Please, can I ask you to take 2 minutes to complete your feedback form? It's very important to us and it really drives future events. So yeah, really important to us. So thank you in advance for that. And lastly, from myself, from Jun, from Richard, thank you very much for taking the time. I hope you found this useful, and please, yeah, any other questions, anything you'd like to discuss, do get in touch. Thank you.